Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Cyrus Webb Presents. I'm your host, Cyrus Webb. So glad you guys could be with us. So, those tuning in on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and on X, we're glad to have you join us. We're going to connect with our friends over on Instagram so they can be a part of the conversation. And last but certainly not least, going to connect with our friends over on Amazon Live. Have a first timer that's joining us on our broadcast today. So, I'm excited about this and to dive into her book and her own journey. And we're now live on Amazon Live with Cyrus Webb Presents. If you guys are new to us on the Amazon platform, welcome. Make sure you guys do hit that follow button. You see it either here in this corner or down below. You also will see the book by our next guest. We're excited to welcome author Sally McQuillen to our broadcast today. She wrote this very powerful and personal book you guys can see here, Reaching for Beautiful. We're going to talk to Sally not only about the writing of the book that does deal with loss, but also a lot of discoveries as well. If you guys are not staying connected with Sally, we'll let you guys know how to do that. But Sally, thank you so much for the time. Really appreciate it.
Oh, so glad to be with you, Cyrus. It's my pleasure. Looking forward to our conversation.
Oh, the same is definitely true for me. I read the book, Sally, enjoyed it. And as someone, my regular audience knows, I don't have children of my own, Sally, but when I'm reading a book like this, knowing I'm going to talk to the author, I think not only about myself, but also about my audience. And you and I were just having a great conversation before this conversation about some of the things that really struck me. But what has it been like for you to hear from people who have gone through different types of loss to be able to see how your story is connecting with them, Sally?
Well, my hope was that this Reaching for Beautiful memoir could be not only for other bereaved parents, but also for anyone who's experienced any form of loss,
Yeah.
anyone who's on a journey of their own self discovery and spiritual evolution. and and anyone who's raised a child that's challenging or that has
Mhm.
prompted them, as I was, to be fear filled.
Mhm. Sally, what I really appreciate so much, and I have, after doing the radio show now for 22 years and doing this show with Amazon for the past five, I told a friend of mine something a couple years ago, and it's something I think about almost with every interview now, and that is the idea of truth. And I said to one of my friends, I think sometimes for some people there is a thing as too much truth. I did not get that feeling from you in reading Reaching for Beautiful. You seem to be so transparent, not only about loss, because you could have just focused on the loss of a child, but you didn't do that. You took us back to your own challenges. You took us into your own childhood. What was that decision like for you to decide what you wanted to share as you also talked about your son?
Well, I really appreciate what you're saying because I do believe that strength lies in vulnerability. and
Mhm.
and and what's interesting to me is that after Christopher died 9 years ago at the age of 21, not long thereafter, my husband was reaching out to mediums to, sort of forge some kind of, he's written a couple of books himself, and one of the first one was, searching for Christopher on the other side, and he had all of this conviction that Christopher is still here in spirit, and I needed to come to that belief.
Mhm.
And so I remember early on being encouraged to go see a medium. And at that time, I had started writing to Christopher about 21 days after he died with such desperation and yearning and so much overwhelming emotion that it was almost as if I was texting him and letting him know each day what I was experiencing, and wanting a place to go in hopes that maybe he could hear me, feel me, know how much he was missed and loved.
Mhm.
And so this medium, one of the first questions I asked was, do you think that I could turn this writing into a book that could ultimately maybe help other people? And in channeling Christopher, he said, and I was concerned because I didn't want to um, divulge, I didn't want to share too much, as you kind of alluded to. I didn't want to be one of those people who's just, sort of like venting, her whole experience or exploiting my sons, right?
Mhm.
But he said the only thing Chris wants you to do is speak the truth. And I believe that I've done that in terms of my own truth and his, in service. What he wanted is it to be in service of others. And so I feel really good about having been open and transparent. And I think having been in recovery from addiction for a really long time,
Mhm.
vulnerability is encouraged. And having kind of grown up, I've spent now half of my life in rooms with other people who are being vulnerable. I'm comfortable doing so, and I'm
Yeah.
grateful for that.
Yeah. As you were talking just now, Sally, I thought about there's a saying, and I know you've heard it, that hurt people hurt people.
Mm.
But I love the fact that even in what you just said, you're reminding our audience that people who have been hurt can also help to heal people too. So, what has that been like for you to take? Because what, for those who haven't read the book, Reaching for Beautiful Yet, the other thing that Sally does in the book is not only talk about, as she just did here, talk about her own challenges, but she goes back to even her life with her father and what she experienced in the household with him dealing with his own traumas as well. What was it like for you to realize that you could break the cycle, Sally, that you could not only be someone who could survive but could thrive and help other people see they could do it too?
I'll tell you, addiction is a very powerful through line in my life, and it's a powerful through line in this story.
Yeah.
And maybe it's as a therapist, I really could appreciate that what I grew up with as the daughter of a volatile alcoholic father informed who I became as a parent, and then in turn played out, even before even before my firstborn Christopher picked up a drink or a drug. It
Mhm.
was something I feared, and I was also, admittedly, as a therapist, trying to um, do everything I could to have grown and come through my own childhood experience such so that I could do things better. I didn't feel like, and it's funny, um, also in a fairly early medium reading, there was this very gifted medium we sat down with in a small group setting who said, your father's here, your father's come through. And my husband and I laughed because we thought we were not really interested in talking to my dad. He ultimately died of alcoholism, and I made peace with him and forgave him, any of his inability to love me. But this medium basically validated that, when his firstborn, was born, he was very disappointed that I was born a girl and not a boy, and that sort of wasn't surprising to me, and I could chuckle about it.
Yeah.
Um, I really had to undergo a process of, making. It was one of my greatest hurts early. It's where the seedlings of fear in my life were planted. This
Mhm.
was a man whose behavior wasn't predictable
Yeah.
and from whom I didn't feel he had the capacity to be loving and affectionate. And so the one thing that I was going to be sure to do was to be loving and demonstrative of that love with each of my three children,
Yeah.
starting with Christopher.
Yeah. You talk about in the book, as you were talking, I was just reflecting on things. It's part of the way my brain works, Sally, is that one of the things that you wrote about though was you used the word fear just now, and you kind of talked about that fear that you had even when it came to your children. I think there was one where you were talking about feeding one child and thinking about Christopher and thinking about what could be, and I love the fact that, again, even in that, sharing that, because fear shows up in different ways, right? Because a lot of times we say things to people out of fear of what they could get into. So we may say things in a way maybe not what they want to hear, but because we feel like it's going to help them. What has that been like for you to kind of think about your relationship with fear itself and how that has helped you too on this journey?
So much, so much of I believe that we all, maybe we show up here, or maybe we're assigned, or maybe we have some contract we don't remember having signed to land here on Earth and be presented with various challenges and lessons. But there's no doubt that one of mine, and one of the things that my son Christopher has best taught me, is to appreciate what fear, the impact of fear in my life, the
Hmm.
existence of it, and then really encourage me to begin to let it go.
Yeah.
And I will probably be striving to do that throughout the course of my life. But I was a very sensitive, deeply feeling little girl, and we didn't have words for what things were going on. I don't think we even knew at that point. I know my mother would say she had no idea that my father was an alcoholic. She said she knew he had a drinking problem, but an alcoholic was someone who was, um, from her perspective, just on the street drinking from a brown paper bag. That's the word. Those are the words that she used. Whereas my father, in many regards, was able to function, and he was also pretty much of a workaholic, and very risk taking. Um, so he wasn't around much, but when he was, I couldn't predict what he would do. And he would do things that were um, fear inducing. So, I remember there was just, I sort of felt like I was under threat. And that is something that I've come to really appreciate as a therapist, that so many of us, especially in the world today, many of my clients are in that state of fight or flight that I had been living in and didn't even know I was living in until probably after Christopher died. I could really reflect on it. So the writing process enabled me to learn about, oh, wait a minute, I've always been in this state. And as a parent, it was very exacerbated. And as a parent of someone who developed an addiction, and who was also a male, and also was someone I was sort of chasing down a lot of the time, but differently, all of my old wounds kind of came out to play.
Yeah. I was thinking about something else as you were talking. I found it in the book. I want to share. I want to reset really quickly, Sally, here, because we have people who are coming in on all the platforms. So hello to you guys on YouTube. Glad you guys will be with us. Dinar, hello to you over there on IG. Slime, hello to you over there on IG as well. Lady Karma, hello to you. Good day to see you as well. Those tuning in over there on X, we see you as well. Welcome to Cyrus Webb Presents. We're on Amazon Live, but we are simulcasting this for Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, X, and on Instagram. So we're glad you guys can be with us. We're speaking today with Sally McQuillen about her book you guys see here, Reaching for Beautiful. We were just talking about fear. I thought about something as you were talking, Sally. I want to actually read it if you don't mind.
Of
It's in
course.
chapter 24 of the book. And you talk about this whole idea of fear and the shifting relationship with it. You say, I often try to tap into a sense that all is well, even when it doesn't feel like it, and all I can touch is my unrest. I work to adapt to my new reality and accept that Chris is no longer here in physical form. And then you go on to say this: when I focus only on my ongoing crush on my firstborn, light breaks through my darkness. I think back to sitting next to Monica on the plane heading to Savannah when we talked about A Course in Miracles. It was Chris's way of giving me access to a fresh way to see. When I place my pain at the altar of my love, you write, light softens it. And then I love this one part. You say, examining fear head on as part of my grief process, I have decided it no longer serves me, and I pray I can outgrow it. I want to talk about that for our audience, Sally, because I couldn't have said it any better, so I wanted to read it directly from you. What has that been like for you to help other people now in their own, as we started this conversation talking about whether it's the loss of a child as you tragically had to experience, or the loss of even a relationship, loss of anything. What has it been like for you to show how people can move forward and not forget, but be able to outgrow the feeling they feel when it comes to the fear and uncertainty?
Well, it's been so interesting to me because in much of my work as a therapist, I have a number of clients that I see that are struggling with addiction or that are in recovery from it. I have a number of grieving clients. I have a number of clients that are have trying to move through trauma, but a number of them, actually a high percentage of them, interestingly enough, I feel like have been divinely served into my practice, who have been impacted by the addiction of a loved one, whether it's a partner or a child, and have also then been driven into this place of fear. Among other effects of addiction, this is one of them. And there's also this really acute powerlessness, and there's trauma. So all of those things were true for me in grief. There was this incredible powerlessness over my world having been suddenly rocked, and I was traumatized, as any mother will be, when she unexpectedly loses her child and a part of her identity. And um, so all of that being said, writing this during the period of time that I was processing my grief and reflecting on my own life, and how that fear was present for as long as I could remember, and then it grew, and then it got really blown up. I also could see that a few years, so Christopher got clean and sober. We sent him away to wilderness and then therapeutic boarding school when he was 16. And my husband and I, being in recovery ourselves, we knew the importance of intervening as early as we could, and we were privileged enough to be able to afford to get him that support. But it was also a huge sacrifice and a stigma, to have felt like I couldn't control or uh, save him myself from the
Yeah.
disease that he ultimately, was such a powerful genetic inheritance.
Mhm.
Um, and so we had this 3-year period of time that was so sacred when he was clean and sober, during which some of that fear could just at least, dissipate a little bit.
Mhm.
But then he began to drink and drug again when he was headed back to college, and when he wanted to be so much like everybody else. And at that time, I had known and benefited from self-help support around, if you are continue to be driven by fear, Sally, you will you will push your son away.
Mhm.
You will not be able to maintain this beautiful connection that you redeveloped during this period of time when he, could become his very best self,
Mhm.
and that kind of closeness. So, what I started to appreciate was that fear interfered with that, because if anyone, has experienced this with their children, if their children are being micromanaged or told, and of course I have more non-compliant children, all of them who want to do it their own way, and I think I think children are meant to. They're meant to learn their own lessons and face their challenges so that they can learn, which is why I think we're here. And
Mhm.
so if I was too busy trying to control things, or, sort of impose my agenda and make him feel bad about himself in any way, then we weren't going to be able to have that really, wonderful relationship that is what I wanted most. And so I started to recognize that even before he died.
Yeah.
And so I got really clear about the fact that the only thing I had power over was to love him. And that I had going for me in spades. No, no one I loved and continue to love more than my children.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sally, I think that in itself is so powerful. Thank you so much for sharing that. The last thing I want to talk to you about is the rest of us. And what I
Mm.
mean by that is one of the things you talk about is having people who are able to come around you and just be there. I think a lot of times we feel like we have to say the right thing, which we probably never do. Because there's no such thing really sometimes as saying the right thing. But you talked about in the book about just having an appreciation for how people showed up for you and the way they showed up. What would you say to the rest of us about the importance of just being present with people and being there for people without feeling like you have to say or do the quote unquote right thing?
I am certain, especially nowadays, there are thousands of adolescents and young adults and children in general dying each day, that so many of us, if we don't have children, if we haven't lost a child, um, i- we know someone who has. We know someone who has. Whether maybe it's a family member, maybe it's a friend, maybe it's. But there will come a time in your lives when you're sort of faced with, what do I do and what do I say? And it's so interesting because I think there is an instinctive, especially on the part of parents, whose greatest fear is that they will lose a child and not be able to keep them alive.
Right.
I recognized that I was this walking representation of that, and so that the upon first instinct out in the world, in a Starbucks line, there was, I could see it. I could, and being sensitive, I could appreciate that that first impulse on the part of other people who spotted me and then remembered what I experienced.
Right.
They wanted to flee. They
Mm.
wanted to flee. And so first and foremost, it's to try to overcome that initial impulse, or as you described, that that part of us that thinks a couple of things. And I was even in this boat years before losing Christopher, where I encountered a woman who'd lost her daughter and thought, oh, I don't want to bother her.
Mm.
So people might think, I don't want to bother that person or approach them, or um, they might think, I am not going to know what to say. I'm going to say something ridiculous.
Mhm.
And guess what? It's almost like, let's just accept the fact that there are no words,
Yeah.
that and if we have the willingness to approach someone who's grieving, especially in acute grief, then it matters not so much what you say, it matters much more how, what sort of energy you approach that person with. So
Yeah.
it's sort of a leaning in, it's an acknowledgement.
Mhm.
It's and I just I follow David Kessler, renowned grief expert, from whom I took a grief education certification, and he just was putting it out in the world. These are the things you could say. You could say, I'm here.
Mm.
You need not be strong, and you are allowed to feel whatever you want or not feel, or sort of an anything or everything. For
Right.
me, it was just a leaning in, when people could lean in and bear witness, when they could have any degree of empathy instead of sympathy, which there was something about sympathy that immediately made me feel less connected and more alienated and alone in grief. And grief is a lonely place to be anyway.
Right. Sally, this is such a great conversation. Thank you so much, first of all, for making the decision to share your truth, but also to be able to open up in conversations like this to let people know, for one, they're not by themselves in what they're feeling, what is possible if they're able to do the work, but also the importance of giving themselves that grace and forgiveness that we all need at times when we don't feel like we're enough or can do enough. So I wanted to thank you for that. Again, Reaching for Beautiful is the book. Sally McQuillen is our guest. For you guys joining us on Amazon, you'll see the book either on this side or down below. So make sure you guys do get your copy either in print or the Kindle edition. Sally, let our audience know, how can they stay connected with you?
They can reach me at www.sallymcquillen.com. And I really welcome any more conversation about any of the things that we've talked about. And I'm grateful to those who are interested in reading Reaching for Beautiful.
Love it. Well, Sally, it goes without saying, you're welcome back here anytime. Looking forward to our next chat together.
Me too, Cyrus. So good to be with you.
Thank you so much. And we thank your audience for tuning in to another great segment of Cyrus Webb Presents. Until next time, you all make it a great one. We'll talk to you soon. Take care.